Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Now for today's topic we're going to go with the Dragon of Icespire Peak, a Dungeon Master Guide. So if you are a player playing in this adventure, please do not continue watching. There are spoilers, lots of them, so this is not for you. Go and play the adventure first, and if you want to come back and watch this video at a later date, if you're a player, that's fine. But if you're a Dungeon Master, stick around because I have a whole lot of really good information for you. Unfortunately, I can tell you now, since I have actually run the adventure and I've done a whole bunch of research, there's a lot of material to go through. So let's start off. So the Manticore of Umbrage Hill. And usually most people, when they start thinking about a Manticore and Umbrage Hill and all of the information you are provided with in the adventure, you start freaking out. And there's lots of advice. Even some of my videos have presented this as being an issue. I've got a surprise for you though. So here we go. So the Manticore appears in the quest Umbrage Hill. It is on page 43 of the adventure, and you'll find the stat block and a little bit of information from the monster manual on page 60 as well. It's sort of like a small snippet. I think they've selected what they thought was, the designers thought was the most important aspects at that particular time. Now the quest can be completed by any character level whatsoever, but it is supposedly balanced for character levels 3, but clever players are required if they are going to try to get through at level 1 and 2. But it can be done. For those of you who are wondering, it absolutely can be done. The character's goal is to ensure that Adabra Gwen, the midwife, is rescued from the Manticore who is attacking the stone windmill on Umbrage Hill. That's what we start off with. Now I will do another video on Adabra Gwen, but not today. This is just the Manticore for today. So how do we roleplay a Manticore? Well, the great thing about our designers is they have provided us with a whole lot of lore, and I would suggest going and checking out AJ Pickett for those of you who watch his channel. He is a featured channel on my channel, and I suggest you can find so much information. But the monster manual, the Dungeons and Dragons 5e monster manual, has really solid advice on page 213 on the Manticore. And a lot of the information I've put in here is from there, but you have to kind of read between the lines and apply it to the context you're dealing with. Otherwise, it won't make very much sense, because of course you can always write down words, but unless you have context and you have some sort of understanding of what they're trying to get at, it's not really going to work for you. The Manticore will attack with tail spikes from the air if threatened, and use cover of the windmill and the Umbrage Hill. Now, that's certainly in the case if it were to try to escape, or in between flying around and throwing out spikes. That's how I would approach the attack side or the combat side of role-playing the Manticore. I know a lot of people are saying, yeah, Fred, that's the combat side, that's not the role-play side of things. Okay, I'm getting there. So they are prone to criticizing and abusing their victims or foes. This is one of the Manticore's greatest joys, so play on that. They can actually speak common, so use it, and chances are every single player has a character who understands common, so that won't be an issue, will it? They are evil predators and fierce killers who will be quite difficult to converse with in a rational manner. So you really have to understand what their motivation is and what they are interested in. If you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult to negotiate or talk with them or have a conversation of any kind whatsoever. Simple bribery and tributes are much more likely to be accepted by a Manticore. So if you go with that, if the players are willing to do those sorts of things, they are much more likely to be successful with what they're trying to achieve. Manticores fear dragons. So this should be played on by the players. They won't necessarily know this though, but Manticores are certainly very much afraid of dragons, and Cryovane, who is a white dragon in the area, it is certainly afraid of Cryovane. So this is its greatest weakness, its Achilles heel, and should be utilized. So make sure to play on that when you're role-playing your Manticore. Manticores aren't that smart, and they can be tricked with the right approach, but it doesn't mean that any kind of trickery will work with them. Even though they aren't smart and they're not brain surgeons or anything like that, you can't just use any kind of trickery to make it work for you. So when you come across players trying to use trickery and deception, there are going to be restrictions. So make sure they are using the right types of deception and trickery that will work. And certainly trickery with a dragon is good, and trickery with bribery is good. Why is the Manticore attacking the stone Windmill and Adabra Gwen? Well, that's a good question. I actually have 4 different reasons that I think is actually the result of the Manticore attacking the stone Windmill and Adabra Gwen. The Manticore is just hungry and wants Adabra or something else as dinner. So it's just gotten a bit peckish and she's on the meal or menu. The dragon has injured the Manticore and it wants healing from Adabra Gwen because, of course, she's capable of doing that. How does the Manticore actually know that Adabra Gwen could actually provide any kind of healing? It could be just common word of mouth, overheard it. She just happens to be the closest one to wherever it is. It doesn't have to have any and complicated information that sort of says, okay, if I go here, I'm going to find myself somebody who creates healing potions. No, she might simply be the first creature. She might simply be the first human or creature or humanoid that the Manticore has come across, and it's assumed that it can do something to help it. So that's how I would approach that. The stone Windmill has been selected by the Manticore as a new home. Now, why has that been the case? Because it's lost its mountain nest to the dragon Cryovane. Cryovane has driven it away, and it selected the stone Windmill as its new home, or posse, or nest, as you might say. The Manticore's mate or offspring have been injured and need some sort of healing potion from Adabra. And the Manticore will then take that potion to them. And of course, they can't fly to the Windmill because they are injured. Maybe it's an injury to the wing, it's torn or something like that. So that would be the last reason or rationale that I would use with regard to why is the Manticore actually attacking the Windmill and Adabra Gwen. So what are the characters' options for dealing with the Manticore? What can they actually try and do? And I've broken this up into 2 sort of categories. The first category is they can fight the Manticore. And you'll find that a lot of players will go straight for this. I know my group really decided that fighting was the option and didn't really consider too many other options, but certainly there are other options, but this is just the first one I will talk about. This is the one that scares most dungeon masters and people away because they're thinking, oh, depending on their level, that could be quite a difficult fight, and a Manticore is actually quite a dangerous creature, so what are we likely to have to do with this? Okay, so here is my breakdown, and it's quite involved, so pay attention. First thing, killing the Manticore, although it's unlikely to need to be killed, it is unlikely to attack the PCs or players' characters unless it has first been attacked or the players' characters get too close. I would consider too close to the Manticore to be about 100 feet. Getting within the range of its tail spikes where it doesn't have disadvantage, that's probably far enough, and you can, if you want to, foreshadow that it will attack if they start moving towards it without sort of firing at it or trying to sneak up on it. You could use a barrage of tail spikes just falling short of the player's feet as a warning to not come any closer. For those of you who are wondering how to sort of foreshadow that, that's how I would approach it in your game. You could reduce the Manticore's maximum hit points or its armor class, or take its multi-attack away for very low level characters if you wanted to. This is often suggested by Bob Worldbuilder and Sly Flourish in the Dungeon Master guides that they have put together. Certainly that is an option if you want to. Now when I say low level, I'm talking about level 1 and 2. I'm not really concerned about level 3 and upward. I don't think that's going to be an issue whatsoever. You can also consider reducing the current hit points of the Manticore to reflect that it has been injured by the Dragon Cryer Vein for very low level groups. So that's levels 1 to 2. Another option if you really wanted to, if they start getting into a fight. They can drive the Manticore away by causing some damage. Now I'm not necessarily specifying a particular number. It might simply be they can drive the Manticore away by doing one lot of damage. So one hit to the creature is enough to have it flee or run away. Or it could have its hit points reduced by half. So if it loses half of its hit points to ranged fire, that will sort of kick in its survival instinct, and because it wants to survive and live and it has a family, it then flies away and returns to them. So a whole bunch of ways of approaching it really. Here's the really interesting part that I discovered. If your group starts about 600 feet plus away from the Manticore, who is currently either on Umbrage Hill or on the Windmill or on the hill itself or flying around it, they can use things like long bows, short bows, the crossbows. Most of them have a very long range. Long range spells will certainly take the creature down or drive it away without the tail spikes being any real threat. You have to understand the threat range for a Manticore's tail spikes is actually quite limited. Whereas the player's characters, even if they are playing at level 1, it doesn't really matter what level they're playing at, if somebody has a longbow, the chances are they will get somewhere in the vicinity, if you start them far enough away, anywhere from about 4 rounds and maybe 2 rounds depending on how they move around. So if they move forward rather than backward, they could have at least 4+ rounds with a longbow shooting at this thing with disadvantage, and the Manticore can't do diddly squat to them whatsoever. Now I know you're thinking, yeah, but that's disadvantage, but its armor class is only 14. It's very, very low. And if it's not using cover because it's having to fly towards them, they can sit back and pepper that thing, and it's probably either going to get driven away, and quite possibly they could kill it as well. And that's exactly what I found in my own game. So the Manticore's limited range of 200 feet with disadvantage is the biggest issue for it. It may have a lot of attacks, but it only becomes really truly dangerous when it's about 100 feet away from its target, and then it has its 3 spike attacks with no penalty. That's when it's truly dangerous. So if you start your combat far enough away, even level 1 characters can deal with this without too much trouble. Surprise! I was surprised. I didn't even consider it. I don't know why I didn't consider it, but I should have, because that's exactly what happened. If the Manticore is not killed, it could return with its mate to create trouble in the future for this group. So it has a family, so we know it has at least a partner. It may have offspring. I have assumed that the creature has some sort of offspring somewhere. What other options do we have that revolve around fighting? Well, they could also attempt to try and scare the Manticore away. They could use some sort of deception or illusion. That could involve something as simple as just the minor illusion spell. Even the roar of a dragon, even if it's only a small roar or an image that sort of reflects something it's afraid of, and dragons would be the best one, even if it's the image of a dragon in the distance. Now there are limitations on minor illusion in terms of the range, in terms of what you can do with it, but there's all sorts of things you could do. Even the head of the dragon popping up and nothing else out of the grass could potentially scare a Manticore away. Let the players play with that if they want to. That would be my approach, and certainly I think that seems fair enough. Now here's what I discovered in my own game. There's no real cover in the plains. I had a look at the map and I thought, well, actually, considering the lay of the land from the bigger map and the smaller map, there doesn't really appear to be anything but just grass. It's just plains. So there's no way to actually stealth or sneak up on this creature where it is currently around the windmill. It's going to be completely pointless. And as a result of one of my players trying to do this, I think they tried to circle around the hill, come around the back. They used, I think they used a spell to try to hide their current location when they were already probably far too close. And that's where your problem lies. If you try to sneak up on this thing, it's probably not going to work. It has a really good vantage point. Remember, the windmill is on top of a hill, and the hill is quite high enough to allow it a good, decent view from all directions. And it's a flying creature, so all it needs to do is fly up in the air, and it's got even better look of what's going on. How about our next option, and that is negotiating with the Manticore. I have got about 7 possible ways you can do this, but there probably are more than that, but I'm only going to talk about 7 that I thought were the key ones. First one, and a lot of these are tailored at the 4 different reasons that the Manticore might be attacking the windmill and Adabra Gwen. Okay, first one, bribing. Let's go with bribing the Manticore. What are we going to use? We're going to use 25 gold pieces. That's actually stated in the adventure. You could use just some rations. It would probably be better to give it a few pounds of meat, but how many low-level characters walk around with meat in their pack? But if they don't have that and they just have rations, why not use that as a substitute? I think that seems perfectly reasonable, something that it can actually eat. Next, you could suggest to Adabra to give the Manticore a healing potion. Now, how do you do this? One, you need to be able to sort of get close enough to talk to her and not have the Manticore attack. So that really means staying out of the threat range and trying to have a conversation over at least 100 feet. That might be a bit more difficult to achieve, but bearing in mind if you have somebody who has a spell like invisible and can cast it on themselves, they might be able to get close enough to Adabra Gwen to be able to talk to her and say, look, just instead of us dealing with it the hard way, let's just give it what it wants. If all it wants is a healing potion, give it the healing potion so it can heal itself or its offspring or its mate if they are injured, and we'll go from there. The next thing I want to do is focus on its home. It's lost its mountain nest. So find the Manticore a new home, like say Cragmore Castle or Thunder Tree Ruins or whatever else you might want to sort of utilize. There are probably a couple of options in the adventure already you could use, but I didn't want to actually talk about them until they have sort of been cleared out. There's no point in me sort of suggesting them unless they have been cleared out. But if you've played The Lost Mine of Phandelver, you'll be aware that Cragmore Castle should currently be empty, and that Thunder Tree Ruins should also be empty, provided that Venomfang has been driven away or was killed in the past. And if you've never played those adventures, there's no reason why you couldn't use them and just say that's the case anyway. You can heal the Manticore's wounds if it is wounded with Cure Wounds the spell, or if you have a paladin, Lay on Hands, or if they have just a potion of them, if they manage to get together enough money to actually buy a healing potion before they left town. I mean, I know you can't buy potions in Phandalin, but there's no reason why they couldn't go to one of the other cities or another location and have a healing potion from there. Okay, so just another option for those of you who are wondering about healing potions, because I know somebody's going to ask. They could try and join forces with the Manticore and convince it that between them they can defeat the dragon, because this Manticore would certainly be afraid of the dragon, but also want revenge on it. They're very vengeful creatures, so yes, use that as an option and a piece of negotiation. You could go with, if you decide the situation, or if the players decide the situation is too hard, they can certainly just let the Manticore have their way with Adabra Gwen and then just run away and leave it at that. There's nowhere that it says you have to do that. Based on the milestone system they have put in place, they start off at level 1. So if they complete the Dwarven Excavation quest, then they're going to be level 2. If they then complete Guard, then they're going to be level 3. They don't actually have to complete Umbrage Hill because they can't get any more levels from it. If you're using the first 3 standard main quests, you can only get 2 milestones off 3 quests. So as a result, they do not have to complete this quest if they don't want to. You can just leave it. In fact, the same thing applies to all of the other quests as well. Out of the 3 quests, they really only need to do 2 to be able to get themselves to level 3. And then after that, progression is going to be by using the side quests, the follow-up quests instead. I know that might sound terrible, leaving her to die, but it is an option. You could try and convince the Manticore to act as the protector for Adabra in exchange for the loft area as its new nest. Now, this is very unlikely. For the player's characters to be able to pull this off, I feel like they might have to sweeten the pie quite a lot to be able to get the Manticore to wind up being a border in the Windmill with Adabra Gwen. I think that's a really hard thing to achieve for any character. But certainly an option, and I knew somebody would sort of ask me that question, so that's why I'm talking about it. So I'm hoping you found this useful. If you did, fantastic. I have a series of videos on the Dragon of Icespire Peak that's starting to develop now. I also have videos on the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is certainly related to this area in the Sword Coast. So if you wanted to check that out, you could. Now, if you want to support the channel, you can do that by checking out my Patreon page. I have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission, you don't pay anything extra. I have a merchandise shelf. Hey, doesn't everybody nowadays? And otherwise, if you don't want to do any of that, you can just keep watching my videos because I do run ads on my videos. So if you watch the ads, I get paid. Now, here we go. Please share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.